On the 28th of February 2005, in a quiet home near Nungua, a man stood in the sand drying his clothes, not knowing Ishi was already walking toward him. Two policemen approached the house, not in a rush, not in formation, just two men sent to settle a simple assault case between family members. They weren't hunting a criminal, they weren't on an operation. They didn't even know who was inside the house. The police officer asked, "Are you the one we are looking for?" The man looked up, no fear, no attempt to run, just a moment, a brief moment, where his past and present collided. The police didn't know they were standing inches away from the most wanted man in Ghana, the man whose face was printed on billboards across 5 regions. The name mothers whispered when they wanted their children home early. He didn't vanish, he didn't fight, he didn't run. The officers grabbed him, unsure of who he really was, unsure of whether he was a danger or just a man involved in a family quarrel. But when they looked closely, when they pieced the ends together, when the fear of his name met the reality of his face, they realized what no intelligence unit, no special task force, no tip-off had ever achieved. They had walked into the house of Ataa Ayi. He was the youngest of 8 siblings, born in a small town in Ghana in 1973. Life never gave him a hand. His mother left for the UK when he was still a boy, leaving him with a hollow house and a heavier heart. School stopped at just class 4. There was no safety net, no roadmap, only streets that seemed to stretch endlessly, full of noise, struggle and chance. Later, he became a taxi driver. The car was supposed to be his lifeline, but the city was ruthless. The fares were small, the bills were big, and the nights were long. Every day felt like a battle against poverty, and some nights he lost. It was a taxi accident in 1998 that changed everything. His only car, his only way to survive was wrecked. Death knocked at the door. That's when the shadows found him. A man named Eddie, smooth, confident, dangerous, offered him a way out. "Just help once," he said. "Drive, watch, nothing more." He was behind the wheel the first time, his heart pounded like never before. The target left the bank unaware. They followed, they struck, then they vanished. And for the first time, fear tasted different. It was thrilling, intoxicating. That first ride wasn't just a crime. It was freedom, and the rush, the power, the danger. It was addictive. From that day, a seed was planted, a seed that would grow into legend. There is a moment in every criminal's life when the world stops seeing them as someone trying to survive and start seeing them as threats. For Ataa Ayi, that moment didn't come with violence, it came with desperation. After the taxi crash, the one vehicle that was supposed to save him, Ayi tried to stay afloat. He hustled, took odd jobs, and clung to honesty like a man hanging from a rope. But hardship has a cruel way of whispering in your ear, and it was during that struggle that he heard his first whisper. A friend, a familiar face from the neighborhood, someone he trusted, came to him with an offer. Not a gun, not a mask, just a job. "Follow us, just help us track a vehicle." And once he stepped through, there was no coming back. He didn't join amateurs, he joined a machine. For years, Ataa Ayi didn't operate alone. Police reports and court documents from the early 2000s mentioned several men who were suspected, investigated, or linked to his operations. Individuals like Nana Osei Razak, Nana Yao Owusu, Frederick Lamptey Annan, and others whose names surfaced during the investigations. Not everyone who was named was convicted. Some were arrested, some were questioned, some were cleared, and some simply disappeared into the shadows. What the police knew was simple. Ataa Ayi moved with a network, a shifting circle of men, real or rumored, who operated with frightening precision. The exact membership of that circle was something the streets whispered, but never confirmed. They had informants, they had inside men in banks. Their robberies weren't spontaneous, they were operations, and Ataa Ayi fit into this machinery perfectly. Quiet, fast, he was just the driver, and eventually he became the face police feared the most. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the world feels normal. Shops opening, cars honking, people bargaining over plantain by the roadside. Nothing suggested danger. Madame Dora Kumi, a businesswoman, stepped out of this bank holding two things, a handbag and a future she thought was secured in the money inside. It was $65,000 and 4,500 Ghana cedis. Money meant for business, for life, for stability. She had no idea she was being watched. A few meters away, in a dusty vehicle, Ataa Ayi sat behind the wheel, calm, expressionless, observant. He wasn't the leader of the gang. Not yet. He was the driver, the engine, the escape plan. But on that morning, something inside him was shifting. They had tracked Madame Dora from the bank. They had timed her steps. They had memorized her every move. When she entered the car and began driving forward, the gang followed quietly, not aggressively, not like in the movies. Ayi's grip tightened on the steering wheel. When she reached a quieter part of the road, the plan activated. A sudden stop, a car blocking her front. Before she could process the scene, the doors burst open. Witness described what happened as a wave, hidden before you could even see the water. For Ataa Ayi, the moment they escaped with the money did something irreversible. It validated him. It told him he could do this, that he belonged in that world, that he wasn't just a driver, he was part of the machine. This wasn't just a robbery, the robbery that made the country begin to whisper his name. Then came the church keys. The streets of Osu, Accra were busy that morning with the usual hum of cars and the chatter of people going about their day. But behind the calm, danger was closing in. Ataa Ayi and his gang had spotted their target, the chief cashier of the Christ Apostolic Church, along with two employees. The three were carrying 5,625 cedis, freshly withdrawn from a bank. It was supposed to be a routine trip back to the church office, nothing more. But for Ataa Ayi, nothing was ever routine. Gunshots shattered the morning calm as the gang chased the employees. But the church officials were clever. They managed to escape into the premises. The cash still clattered tightly in their hands. The gang didn't give up. While searching for their targets, they stumbled upon another room inside the church. There, unsuspecting officials were counting money. The air was thick with tension. One wrong move, one sudden scream, and the entire chase could turn deadly. But Ataa Ayi's gang struck with precision. They seized 662 Ghana cedis, a small amount compared to what they had been after, yet enough to send shockwaves through the city once the story spread. When the money disappeared, so did any belief that these robberies were random. They were targeted, strategic, intelligent, and the name people heard over and over, the name that struck those attacks: Ataa Ayi. Before Ghana knew his name, before newspapers called him a monster, before police officers whispered his movement, Ataa Ayi's world was quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. He and his crew operated through the city like shadows. Their hands weren't on triggers, their hearts weren't hardened yet. Their definition of crime was still small. They believed in speed, timing, silence, information. They watched bank routines. They memorized which cashier came out first, which driver always parked near the gate, which routes were easier to vanish into. No guns, no blood, just precision and hunger. But hunger grows, and in the dark parts of the city, hunger always awakens something else. Fear. Not fear of the police, fear of the unknown, fear of rivals, fear of bad luck, fear of waking up one day and losing everything. And in Ghana's underworld, fear had only one cure: spiritual protection. So quietly, Ataa Ayi began visiting malams, spiritualists, prayer houses, not to hurt people, not to gain supernatural powers, but to feel safe. He wanted invisibility. He wanted confidence. He wanted a sense that nothing could touch him. Those rituals, the chants, the prayers, they didn't give him magic. They gave him something more dangerous: certainty. That certainty became a shield inside his mind, a shield that made him move faster, take bigger risks, look danger in the eye, and step closer instead of stepping back. The city was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own footsteps. A foreign national, a Japanese man in his 70s, walked out of a bank with a small envelope tucked under his arm. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, he was just a visitor, a man in Ghana to do business, mind his life, and return home. But Ataa Ayi's crew, they had already marked him. To them, he wasn't a person, just a target with money. That was a flaw in their thinking, the flaw that would lead to one of the deaths that forever stained the gang's name. He got into his car and headed back toward his hotel. He didn't know that another car, dark and unassuming, was following him silently. Inside were two of the most feared men in Accra at the time, Ataa Ayi and his accomplice. No speed, no panic, just a quiet ant. The hotel wasn't far, but destiny doesn't need distance. It needs timing. As he pulled into the hotel compound, the gang made their move. The car stopped, doors opened, boots hit the ground. The man looked up and saw shadows moving toward him. Before he could even open his mouth, the gun was already pointed at him. And this was the moment where everything changed. Because unlike the other victims, the bank managers, the chief cashiers, the drivers who gave up out of fear, this man hesitated, not fought, not screamed, just hesitated. And that hesitation triggered the shot. He fell right there in the hotel driveway. The gang grabbed the envelope and fled. Minutes later, he was rushed to the hospital, but by that evening, the news broke. He didn't make it. Up until then, Ghana saw them as notorious robbers, but after this incident, they became killers in the public eye. A single decision that Ataa Ayi himself would later admit was the darkest moment of his life. February 28, 2005, Ataa Ayi was living at his sister's house after moving there with his wife. The house was in Nungua, a town in the greater Accra region of Ghana. It started with a quarrel between a tenant and Ataa Ayi's niece. His sister had left to attend other matters, but when she returned, she bailed the tenant out. The niece insulted her mother. Ataa Ayi, enraged at the disrespect shown to his family, intervened. In the confrontation, he struck the niece. The situation escalated. The niece reported the assault to the police. On that morning, Ataa Ayi was quietly drying clothes when two policemen arrived at the house. They had no gun planned, no dramatic tip-off, just a simple household case. Yet, the moment they realized who he was, everything changed. He was arrested on the spot. This was not a first-time encounter with law enforcement. Ataa Ayi's face had been on billboards across 5 regions of Ghana. Yet, despite its notoriety, the arrest came not through a tip-off or an elaborate manhunt, But because of an unexpected domestic dispute, in the following days, the details emerged. Ataa Ayi's confession to masterminding robberies, coordinating a gang, and moving stolen cars. The arrest marked the end of an era, the end of Ataa Ayi's freedom, the start of a sentence that would eventually total 160 years. By 2006, he was officially jailed. Years later, he would rise within the prison, gaining respect among inmates and eventually embrace Christianity. The man who once believed he could vanish and escape justice faced the undeniable weight of the law.